Welcome to the Dudes with Dreaming Off the Ground podcast. This episode today will basically be about the current NFL free agency market and obviously the lean target right now, topic on target. Lamar Jackson's potential extension, now that Kyler Murray has signed a max deal. So obviously, to get down to brass tacks, Kyler Murray signed a $230 million extension yesterday for, I believe, was it 6-7 years. And of that 105, I believe, a million was fully guaranteed. Now, just some things to know from this contract. You know, Kyler Murray, even though he signed the extension, the fully guaranteed money was obviously much less than someone, let's say Deshaun Watson, who basically got all of his $230 million guaranteed. And essentially, what he stands to make every single year isn't going to be around 40 plus, 50 plus million. It's actually around 36.7 million ballpark, which is still really good. But Deshaun Watson is actually right there making probably 40 to 45 million a year. And obviously Deshaun has kind of can command that because of his resume, right? But anyways, so with that said, now Lamar Jackson's contract is now currently in the works, right? Or in discussions and negotiations right now. So I guess the real issue right now for Lamar is that, you know, for him and the Ravens and Bishotti, you know, it's obviously just it's obviously just kind of a game of cat and mouse, and they were kind of like, you know who's kind of like who's shifting the blame as to, you know, who's responsible for that getting done and what Lamar wants, you know, versus kind of what the market dictates. Obviously, Kyler Murray, you know, was the last quarterback to sign his max extension out of all the quarterbacks who were due for extensions. Before I mean, actually not the last one because Lamar's still up for extension, right? Before Lamar, right? And so obviously Lamar's a franchise tag the last 2 years. He's looking to make, you know, obviously I think if I remember correctly, he's looking to make $200 million, you know, guaranteed. You know, either if he signs before the season. But if he waits until after the season, he could potentially that 200 become 250. And obviously now with Kyler Murray, you know, that 230 is definitely going to impact, you know, however many millions, you know, Lamar can make. So anyways, right. I mean, I think ultimately, like, you know, these it's gonna come down to kind of, you know, how, I guess, Lamar's agent and how committed he is to kind of, you know, negotiating with the Ravens front office and, you know, management. You know, but obviously, you know, Mike Tannenbaum today was on Get Up on ESPN2, and I was just watching that today. And he said, well, obviously, some of the implications that come with Kyler Murray's extension, it isn't just the fact that he's impacted the QB market, but the fact that he's also he's the Cardinals stand to lose a lot of talent because of the fact that Kyler Murray signed that extension, right? And Robert Griffin III was on there, and he basically challenged Mike, you know, on that point because of the fact that, you know, NFL players, you know, definitely deserve, you know, their money's worth. And the market value dictates whatever, you know, a player should or stand to make, right? So essentially with that said, you know, I think, you know, Kyler Murray's extension, you know, and Lamar Jackson's extension, you know, I think, you know, obviously, you know, if you look at the numbers on the cover, you know, on the cover photo of this episode, right? You know, obviously Lamar Jackson, you know, has through his first 50 games, is only behind Dan Marino, Ken Stabler, Danny White, Jim McMahon, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, you know, as a starter with a 37-12, you know, win-loss ratio, right? And obviously, like, his numbers across the board are much better than Kyler's, right? 68.6 completion percentage, 59. Kyler's 22-23-1 as a starter. Lamar obviously has won 31 games and 11 losses. QBR, right? Lamar outclasses him there. So, I mean, you know, obviously Lamar is a more valuable asset to a team, right? He's a much better quarterback, much better playmaker than Kyler Murray. He's more talented than Kyler, right? Let's just call it for what it is, right? That's not to say Kyler can't go farther, right, with the team he has. But I do think that there's something to be said about talent, right? And obviously in the NFL, in football and pro sports, you know, us as fans, you know, we reward talent, right? Talent, you know, obviously leading to outcomes, right? So essentially, you know, I mean, my take is that, you know, I do expect Lamar either. I mean, I personally think Lamar, this is what I think, you know, I'm not sure what he's going to do, how it's going to play out because so many things have changed over the past month. I would honestly expect or think that Lamar waits until the offseason and then signs because Shannon Sharp on FS1 basically stated if Lamar signs right now, he's locked into the 200 mil, right? Or however much, 240 to, right? But if he waits till the offseason, then he basically sets himself up for the next free agency market to basically dictate how much he makes, right? How much he earns, right? And ultimately, like, he will make more money, if he's able to perform, outperform, the expectations, of his contract this year, right? Some quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, they basically have kind of really bet on themselves with their incentives and their contracts. Baker basically, he's set up 3.5 million. He has to start 75% of the snaps, or play 75% of the snaps. They have to win at least 10 games. He has to finish top 10 completion percentage to get his 3.5 million, right? I mean, ultimately, Shannon Sharp was on record to say that just tells me that Baker wanted to get out of Cleveland, right? And I mean, I agree with that. I think ultimately Baker just wanted to get out of Cleveland. That relationship was burned, right? But I do think Lamar Jackson, having his relationship with Ravens front office, I mean, you single-handedly saving John Harbaugh's career. I'm calling for what it is. He saved his career. And, ultimately, I mean, the Ravens will give Lamar Jackson the respect he deserves. So I'm expecting, I'm not really expecting a deal to be done next month or so. I mean, it potentially can be, right, if Lamar wants it. And, I mean, who knows? Maybe they can shake some cards and really, make something happen there. So, I mean, it's looking forward to that. But I do think that Kyler's contract is now going to really obviously, like, he's standing. They say that obviously he's number 2 now in annual earnings. He looks for what he's looking to earn. He's number 2 behind Aaron Rodgers in annual earnings, right? So ultimately, I mean, obviously Kyler, I'm not gonna say he doesn't deserve it, right? It's just the market. But I mean, obviously now it's almost like the KD situation. KD's free agency, right? Rudy Gobert getting 5 draft picks, 5 first rounders, or however many draft picks, to get traded. Now the Nets are probably going to look at that and want the same, but it's going to be almost impossible to move KD for that price. And I don't think Miami is willing to kind of pay that price. So, I mean, ultimately, same situation, not necessarily the fact that, because Lamar is not going anywhere, right? He's with the Ravens for life, in my opinion. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how it all shapes out, because, granted, Lamar does get his money. What's that going to do for the other players? Same thing with Kyler's contract, right? What's that going to do with these other players, right? I mean, it could go either way, right? I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins signs extension. JJ Watt's obviously on the better minimum, right? But I mean, there's a lot of talent that they could potentially end up looking to lose. Kirk, obviously, great target, right? So ultimately, there's a lot of different directions that can go. But that's obviously why players like Tom Brady took less money, right? So that's pretty much that. So I mean, hopefully they get some. I mean, hopefully, I don't really care about the Ravens. So I mean, but for Lamar's sake, maybe he gets something done. Anyways, so next topic, we're going to talk about the I guess looks like the top 5 quarterback rankings by top 5, I guess, quarterbacks who are most under pressure when a Super Bowl from Robert Griffin III. They basically had an order starting off. Number 1 was Josh Allen. Number 2 was Russell Wilson. Number 3 was Dak Prescott. Number 4, number 4. I'm doing this off memory, guys. I can't see anything from me. And number 5 is Kyler Murray. So, anyways, I just wanted to address number 1, Josh Allen. Obviously, RG3. Actually, number 1, in my opinion, should still be Aaron Rodgers, only because of the fact that Aaron has been to the NFC Championship game 2 or 3 years straight. I obviously got to see him play 2 years ago, right, in Candlestick. 2 years ago, 2-3 years ago, where my Niners beat him like it is the last playoffs. But I think Aaron, in my opinion, should be most under pressure. Winning MVP, he should be number 1. I guess Allen can fit under number 2, right? Because obviously, having playoffs he's had, the Bills should definitely, try to make a Super Bowl run. They're more rare loaded. They got Von Miller. They got a bunch of other pieces on the offense side of the ball. So I can definitely see why Buffalo is up there too, right? Because Buffalo is a great team with a lot of great pieces, and Josh Allen's a great quarterback, right? In the NFL, obviously top 3 quarterback, as it did, several episodes ago about the top 10 quarterback rankings. So Josh Allen, should be up there too. Now Russell Wilson, obviously this guy's team, the last guy to win a Super Bowl for that franchise, and obviously Ryan Harris up there and right there, if you guys see that. But Russell Wilson, I really don't think he's under pressure. I don't think Russell Wilson really needs to be. I mean, he's under pressure in the sense that, obviously Denver has a great young team. Obviously yesterday's guest, Bobby Wagner, talked about Russell Wilson, going to Denver. Obviously he's a great player. He's a Hall of Famer in my book, right? He obviously gave my Niners fits for how many years? So, But ultimately, I don't think Russell is under as much pressure as, say, an Aaron Rodgers, as, say, maybe a Josh Allen, right? Denver is still not a team that has all the weapons on both sides of the ball as both those squads. And Russell Wilson has won the MVP in some time. He's actually been underrated for quite some time. But if he does win a Super Bowl, it's just going to further his Hall of Fame legacy. I will say Kyler Murray makes sense at number 5 because Kyler Murray, gained the contract extension, gained the money. You do want to make sure that you're once you get paid, you're able to deliver as a quarterback. So that's something else too. Obviously, I don't necessarily disagree with that as well. But I think that's something to really look out for if Kyler can do that. I think Dak at 3, I totally agree with. I can actually even make a case for Dak at 2 behind Aaron Rodgers because of the fact the Cowboys always have all the expectations. Now they have a bunch of players, gain max, contracts, and they're pretty much up the what with all these contracts. So I think Dak Prescott at number 2, I would put at number 2, and I would put Aaron Rodgers number 1, even though he's on the list, because of the fact that even though Aaron Rodgers has a Super Bowl, he has to go back and prove, if he's going to be considered the GOAT discussion, he has to make at least another Super Bowl run, right? Like his predecessor, Brett Favre, like I talked about a few episodes ago, 98 49ers, right? He was able to make 2 Super Bowl runs, right? So Aaron Rodgers should at least make another run, in my opinion. But yeah, I think Dak is definitely up there too. 1 playoff win, same thing with Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar's under pressure too because of the fact he's up for a contract extension. Also same situation as Dak, only 1 playoff win. So I think both these quarterbacks, with the teams that they have and their abilities and their talents, should definitely be able to elevate their teams. Obviously Dak Prescott coming off a 37 touchdown season, there's so many different reasons why the Cowboys should be in the Super Bowl, right? They always have all the expectations to make the Super Bowl, but for some reason they just never do. So, I'm looking forward to Cowboys. I really, as a Niners fan, I'm looking forward to that too, to see how the Cowboys do. Now we can talk about the Niners, right? Obviously, the storyline around Jimmy, obviously the Niners have granted his agent the permission to seek a trade for Jimmy. Jimmy obviously is going to work with the Niners front office staff, and his agents are probably going to shop around. I think it's really late in the game to really get a good market value for Jimmy, right? Because of the fact that now is when training camp is starting, and now basically, there's only 2 weeks before preseason starts, right? So it's really late in the game. I really feel that if the Niners played their cards a little differently, if they hadn't revealed Jimmy was getting shoulder surgery in March, he would have already been dealt. I know the $27 million of cap space would have already been saved. But, obviously now, there's a situation where, and here's another thing to consider, right? Obviously with Trey still being unproven, this is going to be his first full year, taking the helm. I do think that there is an advantage, an upside to having Jimmy on the roster, just even post-training camp on day 1, even if you absorb the $27 million cap space, right? Because now the other issue that's going on is Deebo's contract. And obviously, people have made the argument that if Jimmy is traded, that frees up all the cap space they need to hammer out Deebo's deal, his extension, right? But the problem is, there isn't really a problem actually with that. The problem is obviously Jimmy getting dealt with, right, this late in the game. But there could be a situation when the Niners pay the luxury tax, and they basically are able to, hammer out both Deebo's extension and maintain and absorb the cap hit of Jimmy on the roster, at least until they got to find a true suitable trade partner, right? Or until he's a free agent, and he walks for peanuts, right? Once they have their confidence that Lance is the guy. But Lance obviously being number 1. I actually saw an argument on Twitter today saying that, Joe Montana and Steve Young, right? Steve Young didn't have any issue with Joe being on the roster back in 91 and 92 before he got traded. But it was a completely different situation because obviously Joe was injured, in the 1990 championship game, right? 1990 NFC championship game against the Giants. And, had Joe stayed healthy, Steve probably would have never got a shot. And maybe Joe wins another ring or 2, right? So, I think the issue was, Joe, that situation was much different, right? You had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks duking it out. Steve was looking to play for a long time there, right? Trey obviously, the organization moved up to 3 because they believed heavily in Trey. They wouldn't exchange that much draft capital if they weren't going to start Trey at some point. You make that move because you want that player to start, right? So essentially, I think Trey, should definitely be able to start by week 1. If Jimmy is on the roster, then so be it. I don't really see any issue with Jimmy being on the roster, but obviously cap space is an issue. And with Deebo's extension looming, it makes sense to deal with, right? Josh Rosen is now on the Cleveland Browns. Okay, so It looks like Deshaun Watson and Jacoby Brissett will share that tandem QB1 role, while Deshaun's suspension is basically being served. And Josh Rosen is now going to serve as backup. He pressed the Browns coaching staff front office in training camp. So I don't expect much out of Josh this offseason. Or this coming season. Josh is pretty much, he's been in some pretty bad situations. Maybe now that he's on a good team, he could probably do better, right? I've never really been that high on Josh Rosen. Ever since he came to the league, 3-4 years ago, I was never really a big fan of his. I never really thought that he was an NFL. I thought the Cardinals moved up too high to draft him, in the first round. I thought he was probably a late third rounder, maybe a high fourth rounder, right? And even then, I think that's, Josh Rosen, he never, being a UCLA quarterback. I think Chris Carter or Shannon Sharp, I forgot who it was. They said during that draft when Josh Rosen was coming out, when you have that money, because his family does have a lot of money. His family is very successful, and I think his father was a candidate to be Surgeon General under Biden, under the administration. When you come for that money, it's really hard to be motivated to play, to play at a high level, because when the hits come in, you're not really you think it's almost like Johnny Manziel. You have your family's money to fall back on, right? So ultimately, I think Josh Rosen being a camp arm and obviously as a suitable backup, maybe he'll do well. This is probably the best situation he's been on in his career up to this point. We'll see what happens there. I think ultimately, Deshaun Watson's suspension is really going to impact the Browns season. Their wins and losses pretty much hang on Deshaun Watson, unless Jacoby can really show, what he can do, throughout the time Deshaun serving his suspension, and obviously through the time that, that Josh is kind of learning the playbook as well. And so just watching behind him holding clipboard. So let's see what else. The Chiefs, right? Obviously, Tyreek Hill, no longer there. I think Kansas City will probably, I don't expect them to make a deep run this year. I expect them to lose some games. Their schedule is very difficult this year. Obviously, they have to play the Rams, they have to play the Niners, they have to play the Bucks. They got to play the Bengals. They got to play a bunch of good teams. I personally don't see Kansas City going that far as they have in the past, this season, because of the fact that, there's too many other good teams coming up and out, and so I think KC will probably regress this year. Not to say Patrick Mahomes won't make his other weapons better. I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a great target, right? He's a great deep threat replacement for Tyreek Hill, but he can't do everything Tyreek Hill can do, right? Tyreek Hill obviously being a top 3 receiver in the league, right? That's a gap that's going to be felt. Tyreek Hill production in the playoffs, Tyreek Hill production in the regular season, all the past years, right? And I think another issue with the Chiefs is the fact that they didn't run the ball as effectively. They have 4 running backs on the roster, right? And I think they were bottom third, 31st in running and rushing yards per game. When they won the Super Bowl against my Niners 2-3 years ago, they basically averaged 100 yards per game rushing in each of the playoff games, right? So they're going to need some rushing. They're going to need some assists. They're going to need to up their running game this offseason, this coming season. And so maybe Patrick Mahomes will do well, if they're able to, have a more balanced attack. Andy Reid's against rushing the ball, right? But I think we'll see how that plays out. Now, obviously, Bobby Wagner to the Rams. I think the Rams are looking really good, right? But let's just talk about Seattle. Obviously, like yesterday's guest, Alex Shangham. God bless Alex. I'm looking forward to seeing where he ends up this offseason. And he didn't, and obviously left at Seattle on good terms. But in my perspective, I think Seattle is just a dumpster fire. They're rebuilding and they literally sacrificed all their great players. Obviously, but they still have talent on their team where they can still compete. For at least a wildcard spot in the NFC West. And obviously Drew Lock, Geno Smith, Jacob Eason, I don't know what to say, obviously, and obviously from the linebacking core, I don't know too many of the Seattle. Obviously, you do have Jamal Adams, right, in the secondary. You still have Tyler Lockett, right? But that's pretty much it, So Seattle's probably going to regress pretty significantly too as well this year. They obviously didn't perform too well last season, so I'm expecting more of that to continue this season, right? So let's get to the Niners, right? So obviously Jimmy G, let's say Jimmy's on the roster. Let's say Devo's everything's going the way it is right now. There isn't a contract yet for Devo. Obviously John Lynch is in talks with Devo's agent as of today. But let's just say things are pretty much carrying out, right? How far will the Niners go, right? it's really a coin toss, right? Because obviously Trent Williams actually got a 99 rating Madden as a pass blocker, as an offensive lineman. So, I mean, we'll see, how well the offensive line does. I mean, they were pretty shored up, from this past year, the NFC Championship run. But I think ultimately we're going to have to see, how well the team chemistry is. Obviously, Jimmy Bean locker room isn't really a distraction, but I think all this noise is going to impact the team in some capacity. Even if they say that it doesn't impact them, like George Kittle says, none of this stuff impacts them. He's been taking the high road and been giving pretty good answers whenever asked about the Trey Lance Jimmy G topic. But I think, this is just situations are what they are, right? And so we'll see how that shapes out, right? Now, Doug Peterson in Jacksonville, I think hopefully Doug Peterson can help Trevor Lawrence, progress. He's been a quarterback guru for a good short of his career, obviously playing the position, winning a Super Bowl with Brett Favre back in Green Bay during his playing days, right? And working with Nick Foles, helping that back QB become a Super Bowl MVP. So ultimately, if Doug is able to, kind of work with Trevor Lawrence and help him get to reach that next step, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars might be a team to look out for, right? But there's a lot of conditions and ifs associated with that, right? If Jacksonville is able to take that next step, if Trevor Lawrence is ready, if Doug Peterson is able to get the buy-in of that locker room, he lost the locker room in Philly, so he have to repair and start building some of those relationships again. So a lot of things can happen with Jacksonville. I think they will improve this year, but we'll see. Tennessee, I think Tennessee is still the favorite in the AFC South. Or actually, no. If Matt Ryan is able to lead the Colts and leverage that run game and leverage, that rush, that defense, then maybe the Colts can be the team to be the favorite to actually win the South this year, right? So a lot of great football happening, a lot of great storylines. I think like I said previously, I think the Rams are still a team to beat. I think Bucks are number 2. Because now that they got Kyle Rudolph, I forgot to mention Kyle Rudolph is now on the Bucks, so he's going to be Gronk's kind of replacement as that big body target for Brady in the red zone. And Kyle Rudolph is definitely a serviceable tight end, and he's the same age as Gronk, but he still has a lot left in the tank, in my opinion, at least for a couple more runs. So the Bucks are looking really good talent wise. I just think the Rams are still a team to beat. Obviously Super Bowl champion. Returned most of their starters, right? Granted, they lost Von Miller to the Bills, and the Bills are, in my opinion, are right up there with Kansas City now in the AFC. And obviously, Cincinnati still needs to be considered in the mix too, right? So, there's going to be a lot of great football, a lot of great storylines coming into the season. I'm just hoping for a great season, but I'm looking forward to all this intrigue. Let's see what happens to Lamar's contract, and that's pretty much it. So, thank you all for tuning into this episode. Hope you enjoyed. God bless.